I see something quite fascinating happening, which is that we've suddenly seen men in particular, and African American men, Latino men in particular, they're not just men, moving much more into the anti-woke camp, or as the Republican camp. You see a Democratic Party that is actually becoming whiter in its complexion. And Harris is this sort of, I don't know, she definitely seems to be a symbol of all that in some ways, and an advocate for it. Do you think this election could be a kind of bit of a turning point in terms of this debate, in as much as if it turns out that Trump gets a multiracial coalition, at least maybe has the most multiracial coalition since Nixon among Republicans, that some people on the left will begin to ask themselves, where did we go wrong? What are we not talking about?
Yeah, it's unfortunately, I'm not super optimistic about that, in part because, so if you look at 2016, like I didn't do anything political, political as in Democrat, Republican kind of work until then, because I saw this kind of knowledge bubble forming about Trump and his prospects. And then after the election, which was like the biggest predictive failure of the expert class for a long time, because it wasn't like they were like, oh, I feel marginally more likely that Hillary Clinton is going to, but they were like, it's literally impossible. The Republicans are destroyed for a generation and so on. But rather than learning anything from that, what they did almost immediately was trying to blame voters for voting the wrong way. So find deficiencies in voters rather than going, oh, well, what did Clinton mess up? Or, oh, how can Democrats change their messaging? They went, oh, what's wrong with the voters? They're a bunch of racist, sexist, authoritarian, blah, 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 blah. Or coming up with conspiracy theories about the Russians and so on. And so they didn't learn anything. And in fact, some of the narratives that they latched onto about race and gender have made it really hard for them to see the trends that have been ongoing for the last decade or so. So for instance, it's just not the case. It has never been the case that Trump held any kind of extraordinary appeal with whites. White turnout was stagnant in 2016 as compared to 2012. So he didn't mobilize a bunch of whites to the ballot box to take the country back from the black president, Barack Obama. That just never happened. The whites didn't turn out any more than usual. And Trump did actually a little worse than Romney did with whites. And part of the reason why he did a little worse with whites is precisely because of some of his racialized and misogynistic rhetoric and stuff, which a lot of white people who would ordinarily find Republican found disturbing. Trump won the Republican nomination with the lowest share of votes of any Republican in modern history. He was not overwhelmingly popular. It's just that there were 12 other people or something he was running against. And so he had the biggest share of those people, but he won with the smallest share of the pie. He wasn't overwhelmingly popular with whites. And the reason he was able to win in 2016, despite doing middling with whites compared to Romney and other predecessors, was because he got a bigger share of the black vote. He got a bigger share of the Asian vote. He got a bigger share of the Hispanic vote, which helped him flip swing states like Arizona and Florida and Georgia and Ohio, where there's Cleveland and some of the Rust Belt states that have large numbers of African Americans, like Detroit and Michigan. And so it was these shifts among minority voters that allowed Trump to win, despite somewhat middling performance with whites. But we haven't been able to process that fact.
What happened in 2020? Did that trend continue in 2020?
Yeah, so they continued all the way down the line. So
and it's continuing now in the polling, right? It's still there. Yeah. It's growing.
So lightning walkthrough, 2018, the midterms, Republicans got the exact same share with Black, Hispanic, Asian voters as they did in 2016. The reason why the Democrats were able to see gains was 100% due to defections among white voters. White voters continued to be, okay, fast forward, 2020, the same thing. In fact, Trump actually got a bigger share of Black voters, Hispanic voters, and Asian voters than he did in 2016. And this was extraordinary because turnout was much higher. So he got a bigger share of a bigger pie of white voters. And it wasn't just men, women as well, non-white women, Asian women, Hispanic women, Black women. Kamala Harris was on the ballot. And Black women voted more for the Republicans in 2020 than they did in 2016. And the reason why Joe Biden was able to win was 100% due to shifts among white men. White women even went more towards the Republican Party. It was white men who were alienated by Donald Trump over the last X years who defected and allowed Joe Biden to win. And so, and in the midterms, the 2022 midterms, all of these trends continue unabated. And so these narratives that we have about race and gender, for that matter, actually prevent us from understanding what's been going on.